Hi, the next important concept that we need to learn before we dive back into our Thumbfight app is classes and objects. Classes are the most important part of object-oriented programming. Object-oriented programming, or OOPS, is a programming paradigm that relies on the concept of classes and objects. It is used to structure a software program into simple, reusable pieces of code, blueprints, actually called classes, which are used to create individual instances of objects. In simple terms, classes are the software code that provide a combination of properties and behavior. And when we initialize them at runtime, they become objects. A single object in the memory is known as instance. It is all a bit confusing, but it will clear up as we go through some examples. So from a Thumbfight app, the most basic piece is a thumb. If I want to write a class for that, it should be something like this. So for that, right click on this package and go to new Kotlin Class / file. Keep it chosen as class so that you don't have to write the class keyword, and type in the name of the class, press enter, and then the class keyword should already be there. So now this is the class that I've created for thumb. Let us give it some properties like var thumb type, which is int, and var, which is score. It should also be int. And let us also add some functions like start playing. So these are just dummy functions. They won't do anything, just to give you an idea. So you can see we already have some errors. So in Kotlin, all the properties must be initialized or they should be abstract. So I can just initialize it to the default values. In Java, it will be done automatically, but in Kotlin, we have to do it here. So this is a simple class where thumb type and score are the properties, while start playing, stop playing are methods, also known as behaviors. So this is a simple class for us. When we go to main, suppose we go to main, let us clear it up for now. I can create an object of the thumb class using this method. So what this will do is it will execute the default or the empty constructor. Now every class by default has the empty constructor, which you don't have to write, but it is always present. We can make it private using the private keyword, but for now let's keep it like that. So going back to main, this thumb will then have an instance of the thumb class. Thumb can also be called the object of the thumb class. So now I talked about constructors. These are the next things that we need to learn about in classes. So I already told you we have the empty constructor, which is already present in all classes. The next thing is the primary constructor. So what if I want to pass this thumb type in the constructor itself and I don't want it to be initialized using the default value? Because if I forget to initialize it, it will always remain 0. So if I'm using the value and getting it printed, it might cause an error. So this is how you use the object and its properties. You can see it is 0. So now let us do one thing. Let's create the primary constructor. So we will just copy paste this here. So what will happen now is whoever is creating an instance of thumb, whoever is creating the object or the instance, will have to pass this value. So I now go back to main. I can see there is an error here, which says that the property is missing. I can see that there is an error, and the error is that there is no value passed for parameter thumb type. So I will just write thumb type equal to 0. Or I can actually omit everything and just pass 0. And it will automatically assume it to be thumb type. You can see that now it works. So the guys from Java will be wondering, what if I want to do some operations in the primary constructor? Because there is no body of the primary constructor, so it cannot have any code. So for that, Kotlin has something called the init blocks or initialization blocks. These blocks are executed as soon as the primary constructor is called. So what I can do is I can have var thumb name of string. And then once the thumb type is passed, I can use that to assign the thumb name. So if thumb type is equal to 0, thumb name is left, else name is right. Okay, so you cannot initialize before you declare it. Yeah. So we can have more than one init blocks also. So I can write one more init block here. What will happen is first this init block is executed and then this one. So if I run the main now, I can see that first the initialization blocks are executed and then the println statement is done. So instead of printing the thumb type now, I can actually print thumb name, and based on the value that I pass here, the thumb name will get assigned automatically. So this for left. If I change the thumb type to 1 or any other value, we will get right. Now, what if I want another constructor where I can pass the initial score? So sometimes I'm creating thumb classes at the start of the game, but sometimes I want to create thumb classes with an initialized score. I don't want the score to be always 0. So in that scenario, I can create one more constructor with initial score. Here, what I will do is I will just set the score is equal to initial score. So you can see here this secondary constructor, or what this constructor is called, needs to have all the parameters that are required by the primary constructor and also needs to call it. So this thumb type will actually invoke the primary constructor. So now if I go back to main and I use 2 comma 1, what will happen? You can see that the 2 will be taken for initial score and thumb type will be 1. So I can actually print thumb score, and if I execute it, you can see that the score property has been initialized with 2. So what if I want to force everyone to use this constructor no matter what, whether it's the starting of the game or in between the game? So in that case, I can go here at the beginning of the class definition and write private constructor. What this will do is it will make the primary constructor private, so it can only be invoked by secondary constructor or any static methods. We will come to static later, but we can actually limit anyone else from calling this constructor. So if I go to main I can actually not write this one. You can see I'll get an error that we cannot access the primary constructor or the initialization because it's private. So now you can see that there is a suggestion here. It is asking us to remove val from parameter. What it means is that this thumb type, if I remove the val or var, the thumb type will cease or will stop being a property, which means that this can only be accessed in the initialization blocks. So I can use it still in all the initialization blocks, but I can't use it in the methods. You can see it is not visible. But as soon as I write a val or a var here, this becomes a property. And then I can use it later in the methods. If you are not using any initialization parameters later in the class, you can just omit this val or var, mostly val, and your class will still work. Lastly, there is something called the companion object in Kotlin. For Java folks, the corresponding word they are looking for is static. So anything that you write inside the companion object is the static method or the static variables or constants. Now, every object of a class shares this static object or our companion object. This happens as the companion object is linked to the class and not the object created during initialization. So all the methods and constants in the companion objects are executed using the class name and not the instance. So if I write a variable here, number, and I want to access it, you can see if I write thumb.number, it will say the property is not there. So it cannot find any member property because member properties are defined inside the class and not in the companion object. But I can write thumb.number. You can see thumb with a capital T, which denotes the class and not the object. So let us do a simple exercise to show you how this works. So we'll go back to thumb and we will write a function print number. What this will do is it is going to print the value of the number which is coming from the companion object. So the classes, inside the classes, all the methods can access the companion object directly. Everything inside the companion object. And I'm going to use this method here. I will create one more thumb1. So if you press Control D on Windows and Command D on Mac, you can duplicate any line. So let us duplicate this line also, thumb1, and then I will assign it another value and going to print these values again. Let's run it. Yeah, so there was no need to add another println as the method is already printing the values. So let us remove this extra println. So you can see that this number was initialized with 4. So both thumb and thumb1 got the value as 4. Now as soon as I change the value using the class property access, both of the objects thumb and thumb1 are now printing 5. So if you want a property to be shared across all the objects or instances, you use something called the companion object. It is also generally used to define the constants, which will then be available to everyone. So with this, we come to an end of our lesson on classes. This is also the end for our initial Kotlin learning. My suggestion would be to revise all the Kotlin learning videos before you go to the next video. See you there.